As a sex worker, I find that a lot of my clients need to talk. A lot of clients are seeking emotional intimacy as well as physical intimacy, and I think that this is true of both in real life clients and online clients. A sex worker can be a safe person to talk to, who won't judge you, doesn't know anyone that you know, and can take a more objective view of your situation. I have a lot of clients that were going through a difficult time in their lives or some kind of loss. Common scenarios are divorce, moving to another city, or the death of a loved one. All these are types of grief where somebody would experience grief. And I am going to focus on the last one, the death of a loved one, because I feel like encountering a grieving client can be sometimes really awkward and it's hard to find the right thing to say. So just looking online, there are a lot of really good tips for dealing with somebody who's grieving. And I think most of them can apply to a sex worker-client relationship. Usually when someone is grieving, "I'm sorry" or "I'm sorry for your loss" is always a good thing to say. It acknowledges that you see that they're in emotional pain without giving any type of advice or judgment. However, I find that when someone wants to talk about their loss, you really can't just keep repeating the same thing over and over. It's good to let them talk and provide active listening, but I think a lot of people want more of a response than, "Oh, I'm sorry that that happened." So death and grief are kind of awkward subjects, and it can be really easy to put your foot in your mouth. I certainly have several times. It takes a certain amount of discernment to know when something is appropriate to say and when it's not. So here is an example of what not to say. A client had lost his wife and wanted physical intimacy for the first time since the loss. He made an appointment to see me and a friend for a 2-girl appointment. The fact that he mentioned his loss let me know that he wanted me to be aware of the situation so that we can be sensitive and act appropriately. Unfortunately, my friend didn't seem to know what to say in this situation and basically did everything wrong. So the first thing she did was ask how his wife died. This is appropriate in a lot of situations, like if a regular client tells you they've lost a loved one unexpectedly. A pretty natural response, I think, is to be like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, like what happened?" However, when it's someone you've just met, if they want to tell you what happened, they'll usually just volunteer that information pretty quickly. Some types of death are stigmatized, like an overdose death or a suicide. So the person may not want to discuss it if it's a situation like that. The fact that they died is more important than how they died. So when it's someone you don't know well, just let them volunteer the information about how the person died. It turned out that his wife died from an accidental overdose of the prescription medication Seroquel. She had likely forgotten that she had taken her medication, and she took a second dose, and that was enough to kill her. Really sad, definitely really sad. I think a good response to this would have been, "Oh, that's so awful, so sudden and unexpected. I can't imagine how hard that must be for you." Acknowledge that you have no idea how they feel in that situation. So my friend responded with something like, "Oh yeah, that happened to my daughter's boyfriend's stepmom. That drug is so dangerous, they really need to stop prescribing it." There are multiple things wrong with that response. First of all, even though my friend did not mean to compare the loss of his wife to the loss of her daughter's boyfriend's stepmom, it kind of came out like she thought she knew what he was going through because the same thing happened to someone else she knew. Also, it kind of took the focus off of his loss and made it into a story about her. And finally, giving your opinion about the circumstances of the death is not necessary. You don't need to speculate about how their loved one's death could have been prevented. Just let them talk and provide active listening. Sometimes it's okay to let someone know that you've survived a similar loss while acknowledging that you still don't know how they feel. For example, if my friend had said, that's so sad, I know how difficult losing a spouse is, my husband died a few years ago, I'm still really devastated. I can't imagine how hard this loss must be for you. That would have been totally fine. This lets them know that they aren't alone. You can relate to their loss, even though you can't know exactly how they feel. The key thing is that it has to be the same kind of loss. So if their sibling died and you've lost a sibling too, it's okay to say that. That's a good thing to let them know you've been through the same thing. However, if your pet died and their sibling died, you probably don't want to say that because it kind of sounds like you're minimizing their grief by making that comparison. And you do want to keep in mind that this isn't about you and your grief experience. It's just to let them know that you can relate. The client was clearly uncomfortable with my friend's response to his loss and started heading for the door when my friend added one last inappropriate comment. She kept talking about how dangerous this drug is and telling stories about people she knew who had problems with it. And then she was like, in fact, I call it Sarah Kills because it's so dangerous. So you definitely don't want to make any kind of joke about the death or their loss or anything. Sometimes having a sense of humor can be really helpful to the bereaved person, but just let them make the jokes, like if they feel comfortable joking about it. Never joke around about somebody's loss like it's not a funny subject. One final thing that you should never do to someone who's grieving is say anything that begins with at least. At least he's no longer suffering. At least it was painless. At least you got to say goodbye. At least he died doing something that he loved. At least his story could be a lesson to others. At least he didn't have any children. At least he died old and lived a full life. At least he died young and didn't have to suffer through old age. At least you can afford his final expenses. At least you won't have to care for a person with a chronic illness anymore. At least he wasn't cut in half by a train. At least his body wasn't eaten by rodents. Like, someone's loved one died. There's no silver lining to this cloud. Yes, there are ways in which this death could have been even worse, or it could possibly even be beneficial in some ways. The bereaved person is almost certainly aware of this. If they want to comfort themselves by trying to see the positives in this, let them. Actively listen to them, but don't tell them that this death could have been worse or how it might in some way be a good thing. They really don't need to hear that right now. Although it may be surprising, bereavement is something that I deal with quite frequently as a sex worker. I admit I never know what to say. I almost always find it awkward, but I think it's really important to be there for my clients and provide emotional support. I just had a client who lost his mother when she decided to discontinue treatment for her illness. I really wasn't sure how he felt about her decision, so I tried to be sensitive about that. I've had many clients who are widowers. A regular client just lost his wife unexpectedly last year, and I know that was really hard for him. And then also, I have had several clients who are caretakers for a wife who has a brain injury, and this can be a big source of grief too, and loss of their relationship, how it was before the brain injury. And I just always try to let them know that they are a good husband and they deserve to have time away from being a caretaker. And I hope this can help anyone who knows somebody who's grieving and doesn't know what to say. Thanks for listening, and I hope this can help someone. Thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe and hit the bell icon if you want to be notified when I post a new video.